Frances, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Long time no talk. Thanks for being here. So let's get the politics first out of the way. So this is Joe Biden's big boy press conference happening today. I see it's being reported at 5:30, or that it's going to be happening at 5:30 Eastern today. His big boy press conference. What do you know about this press conference?
Well, honestly, I'm the international editor, so I haven't really been following the train wreck that is Joe Biden as closely as some of you. But I have been trying to follow what exactly is going on regarding this NATO press conference. And one thing I could say is that it really seems like the White House is going out of its way to keep him from sort of events where he's mingling with the other world leaders in front of cameras. As you all recall, in the G7 conference, which was the last big international engagement that Biden had before the debate, there were these strange videos where Biden just sort of walked off, and then the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, had to run after him and grab him so he didn't just leave. There were multiple embarrassing videos like that. He seemed to creep out the Pope at one point. So we haven't seen anything like that at the NATO summit. And I think that's deliberate. I think the White House basically tried to keep the cameras at bay, and now they're preparing, the big boy press conference. And that is a completely staged, managed event where they're hoping that they can keep everything under their control.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Don't let him mingle with other world leaders. Whatever you do, don't let him mingle.
Feels like, I'm not an insider. Yeah. I don't know what they're actually saying, but it really, when you compare what we're getting out of NATO from what we got out of the G7, it feels like someone just said, don't let him near any of the other presidents. Just keep him in a box.
Yeah,
somewhere.
Well, I did see a video of him the other day, just at this thing, next to Trudeau. So one at a time, a world leader would come out and shake hands with Biden, I'm guessing because we're the host nation of this thing. And Trudeau came out, and Trudeau's a handsome fella, Francis, handsome young guy, young chap. So just seeing the difference between the two of them standing next to each other, again, that's like a striking difference of one is very, very, very old. But yeah, all in a big group mingling, that's no good. All right, so it looks like 5:30 tonight is that press conference, the big boy press conference. And I guess the premise of that is that he'll be answering more than two questions. Is that normally how these international things work? Two questions?
I mean, usually, I'm thinking of Vladimir Putin, who is also an elderly man, by the way, who will do these 4 or 5 hour press conferences at the end of the year. That's his big New Year's tradition. He'll just sit, and then reporters will talk to him for hours. And granted, Russia's a dictatorship. These are friendly reporters. This is not real journalism. This is not, anything comparable to what we have here. But the guy will sit there for 4 hours and answer even friendly questions. And, we're being told that we should expect, he might answer 1 or 2 questions, and that's going to be our big thing. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing when you look at, I'm glad you brought up Trudeau, because Trudeau is obviously, I wouldn't trade Biden for Trudeau. I think Biden, even with his advanced age, is much more intelligent and capable than Trudeau is. But, all these other countries have world leaders that seem like they're remotely within the proper age range to, that you would trust them behind the wheel of a car. You've got Zelensky, who's at the NATO summit. You've got President Yoon from South Korea who's there. You have all these world leaders at the NATO summit that look reasonably competent, even when, if you know what their actual policies are, like Trudeau, they're somehow even worse than Biden. But there's still, the optics are there. And I think that's a big issue that the White House is trying to get us to, not believe our lying eyes and lower our expectations of what the presidency of the most powerful country in the world should look like.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, these last couple of days and weeks, we've been chronicling the Democrats slowly coming out against Joe and how he's got to go and whatever, and they're going to lose the election, whatever. But every statement from a world leader, I saw the German chancellor the other day, talks about everything's great, no problem, Joe's wonderful, haven't seen anything bad, whatever. So one wouldn't expect any fellow world leader to come out and against Joe, right?
No, I think everybody's uncomfortable. There's all these that I'll go back to Zelensky, because now there's all these rumors that Zelensky's considering talking to Russia, having direct talks with Russia before November, because he's concerned. There were these back-to-back reports. The first report was sources say Zelensky saw the debate and he is really worried. And then sources say Zelensky's thinking about talking to the Russians because it's hopeless. So, that's a good example of a country that has pretty friendly relations with the United States, who, wants to be even friendlier with the United States. And they're looking at Biden and saying, we don't know what to do. We don't want to be involved in the middle of this because it's a disaster and it's embarrassing. And as an American, it doesn't feel great to know that the other countries are embarrassed to be seen near you because of Biden.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the what's the point of this thing in general? Even if Biden was doing great mentally, what is noteworthy about this NATO conference?
So the point of having a NATO summit every year is basically to get the alliance on the same page of who our friends are, who our enemies are, and what the path for the future is. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, NATO kind of lost its core reason of being, and it has to recalibrate into why are we here. And that's been decades of work, right? And so the work continues. And we got this NATO declaration basically mapping that out today or last night that says Russia is our top threat. We're very concerned about Russia. But then the interesting thing I thought was that the declaration went out of its way to attack China and said, we recognize Russia as our top threat, but China's becoming increasingly concerning, not just because it's allied with Russia, but because it engages in all this nefarious behavior and cybercrime and espionage and intellectual property theft. And I thought that was a pretty big shift and a risk, because NATO is basically telling China, you're next. And that's, China's already trying to prepare for that with all this propaganda saying that NATO is trying to create an Asian parallel and that, once they get rid of Russia, they're going to go for China, which it kind of seems from the declaration that the NATO powers do feel that way, that once they resolve the Ukraine situation, they're going to start focusing on China.
What do you think of that?
I think we should just completely, forget Ukraine and focus completely on China, because China is the top threat. China's destroying entire industries and destabilizing NATO countries, especially in Europe. You see countries like Italy that had a huge problem when the coronavirus pandemic happened, because a big chunk of their manufacturing is workers from Wuhan that went to Italy. You have Belt and Road problems all over NATO countries. You have Hungary that is essentially turning itself into a client state of China under Orban. Orban comes here, says he's the top conservative anti-communist and he loves, God and Christianity, and then he goes to China and he hugs Xi Jinping. So there are a lot of really big problems with NATO regarding China, and I think arguably China's a much bigger threat than Russia to most NATO countries.
On that COVID point, that was such a fascinating part of the story, because remember, it was China that shut down first, and then it was Italy. And you're like, what was that about? And it's because these Chinese companies came in and bought all the garment manufacturing industries of this one particular town and had direct flights from Wuhan to this one town that's now basically China, going back and forth all the time. That's why Italy got hit so hard first. Okay, so let's talk about Ukraine for a minute. So I found this clip to be something. This is Blinken.
And I'm also pleased to announce that as we speak, the transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands. And those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer to make sure that Ukraine can continue to effectively defend itself against the Russian aggression.
So a couple things. My first thought was, is that good? They seem to be very, very happy about this. Is this good that we have F-16s going to be flying there soon?
Well, it's good for Ukraine. I think Ukraine needs a shot in the arm desperately to keep competitive with Russia right now, and this is a good shot in the arm. I think it's good that the F-16s are not coming directly from the United States. I believe they said they're coming from Denmark. They are American jets, obviously, but they are not, it's not us directly doing it, which gives us another layer of protection from Russia just declaring war on us. So that part's good. The bad part is that it continues to escalate this war without end, and the war has been going on for a decade now. We think of it as the war began in 2022. That is not what happened. before the full-scale invasion, Russia invaded and colonized Crimea, and it was at war through proxies with Ukraine since 2014, since Obama. This is Obama's war. It's a decade old, and there's no end in sight. And so when you see this, we're giving them more weapons. On the one hand, it's great for Ukraine. They are very close to not being able to stay competitive with Russia, but it also continues this endless war, and there's no one has a really good solution, at least in NATO, of how are we going to stop the actual killing.